Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to share this time in the space with you. My name is Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University. And I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Christopher Young. This man, I met via email some months, might even be a year ago, Chris. And I knew
December.
December, gee, my life is just moving at accelerated Virilian speed. But I knew when I read those first few emails, and I read them again this morning, Chris, I realized this was a man who was centered, who was thinking deeply about the world and about life and about citizenship and about health, and was also thinking really deeply about research. And this remarkable man has enrolled in a PhD by prior publication. So this conversation that you're going to see today is sort of a proxy for our seminar for his PhD by prior publication. Now, the PPP is what I call the dragon of PhDs. You've heard me talk about the unicorns of PhDs, but the dragon is something spectacular and important. A remarkable human who already has demonstrated they are a remarkable human comes to the enrollment. And they come to this enrollment with a life and experience and expertise and struggles and challenges that they wish to resolve through research. And we enable these remarkable colleagues to transcend and transform. And they, on the way through, happen to transcend and transform knowledge and transcend and transform those of us who have the privilege of walking with them on this journey. But my first question, Chris, is tell us a little bit about how a remarkable Australian medico has ended up in the United States. How has all of this happened, mate?
Well, I usually talk way too long. I'll try to be quick. I'm a sixth, seventh generation Australian. Most of my ancestors are convicts. The oldest was transported 1800, and most of them are from Ireland, but they're from Scotland and England and Wales as well. And my surname, William Young, was transported in 1816 on the ship, the Elizabeth I. But my oldest ancestor, Richard Mills, who comes from some little island uh, off of Wales, he robbed a man with another man in 1799 who was sentenced to be hung by the neck till he was dead.
Right.
But because he was 19, they changed it to transportation in Australia. And he did well. He didn't have to rob anymore. And he did go on the wrong side in the Rum Rebellion, but he was given land over the Blue Mountains. So he had a son um, who was my ancestor, who's the first white man born west of the Blue Mountains. And and then like I've got a great grandfather uh, who was basically in Dubbo in the 1860s. So all my family were in the country until the Depression, and then they moved to Sydney. And so I am the first person in my family to finish high school and the first one to go to university. But my parents were very intelligent. They just were from poor families. And I believe that Mr. Whitlam made all the difference. And all I needed to do was get the marks, but I did not need to have the money. And so the destiny of my family changed. And my younger brother and sister went to university too. But it's not a little thing, it's a huge thing. But my father was a white collar worker, and his father was disgusted that he dared be a white collar worker. He should have been a blue collar worker. But my parents were very encouraging. So I wanted to be a doctor since I was 11, be a surgeon since I was a medical student, and a colorectal surgeon since I was a final year medical student. And as part of my training, I needed to go to the Cleveland Clinic because that was the world mecca of ileal pouches, total proctoclectomy and ileal pouches. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wishing that I'd gone to America. So my son James was born in Cleveland. And he, even though he's also an Australian citizen, he has said his entire life he was an American. And in 2019, we're talking about the future. He said, well, I won't be there. I'll be in America. He has asked his entire life since he was 5, Dad, when are you getting a job in America, when are you moving to America? And so I promised him I'd do the best I could to get a job and college for him. So we're in this small town in Kansas, and he's at college, and he's got one more year. But it has meant that I've gone from a city of 5 million people, from the largest teaching hospital in Australia, to a town of 6,500 and a small hospital. So it meant that I've had some spare time, and I did an MBA in 2022. I started a doctorate of education last year, and I decided in December I wanted to do a PhD. And I found that the American PhDs weren't to my liking. I'd have to repeat subjects all over again. And then I found a PPP, and um, most people will agree I'm a little obsessive and I research extensively. And then I found your videos, and that was like a light at the end of the tunnel. And I looked at every single video you had from Flinders and then from Charles Darwin. And I had this belief that if that lady could be my supervisor, I could do it. And I told my wife, I'm going to email her. She probably won't reply, but I've got nothing to lose. And so I did, but I needed faith. It's really strange that I needed a belief system, and that was the biggest thing. I think it was you and I haven't spoken much, but I feel like I've spoken to you forever
Oh,
because I've watched your videos, and you'd probably repeat the same things. But I can't explain the inspiration from watching those videos, but whatever it was amazing. And then I wrote you a proposal, and we worked out the 12 main papers for the PPP. And then since then, I've really tried to get a theme and an understanding. And what I realized is that I didn't need to go looking. It's almost like Dorothy. Yes, I'm in Kansas. It within me what I needed to put into this, and that is starting very early, staying focused, and doing things methodically. So I am very committed to doing things properly. I am a rule follower in my action. Sometimes my I don't follow rules in my mind. I remember being very upset at school when I was told that you could sin in thought and deed. It was very unfair. I said, I'm prepared to be a good boy, but you can't criticize me for my thoughts. Yes, I'm very Catholic, even if I attend Mass or not.
yeah.
But essentially, what I was wanting to reflect is that doing good research has actually been a journey for me, and it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable, and that I do feel that I've had a lot of experience now. And I actually feel that I created this model of who I wanted to be as a research supervisor, and which is there's three role models. There's the one you observe, there's the one you read about, and there's the one you imagine. And in terms of research, I have imagined the supervisor that I wish I had, not not wanting to criticize people, but realizing I had amazing clinical supervisors. But in research, many times they had some skills that they weren't as good at the other. And so I looked at all these skills and went, this is the person I would like to have had. And I tried to become that person. So I have had some really good supervisors, um, but and maybe that, but little things. But I've had quite a lot of students now, and I really try to encourage them that there's pain all the way, but there can be support. And the other little thing that I've mentioned in my thesis is to never, ever give up. Now, I'm sorry, it took me a long time to learn this. I was a good swimmer when I was younger. My younger sister was an Olympian, and my parents were probably very obsessive and wanted us to excel at everything. But I sometimes failed to be able to focus on my best effort. Um, I was lucky that I always did well at things, but I never often did my best. And it took me to I was an adult to actually really do my best efforts. And and is that important? Well, it's important to me because I was, it's a religious thing. It's always taught that you should use all the gifts God gave you. Uh, I've certainly learned to do my best efforts better the longer I've gone, and um, and that has often been the main thing. I'm not perfect. There's lots of people smarter than me and better than me, but I certainly believe if I do my best effort and I never give up, that I can succeed.
This is inspirational. I mean, so many things to say about that, Chris. I think the impact of Gough Whitlam on the nation of Australia, we need to continually remember. And what we need to remember is the gift, I think, of education. You come from, a blue collar and a white collar background. You're the first in family. I was the first in family, blue collar, white collar background as well. And what your story conveys to us is the role of education in summoning social mobility, political mobility, and intellectual mobility. And I want to tap into your expertise as well, because your career, and you're a very humble man, and your career in as a surgeon in surgery has transformed tens of thousands of people's lives. So could you tell us where the interest in colorectal surgery, where it came from, and why it is important to you, of all the areas that your brilliant mind could have enacted, why that one?
So I wanted to do surgery because of David Skeffington Johnson, who was my third and fifth year tutor at Westmead. But during final year, I was attached to Dr. David Fales for 6 weeks. Now, I had no idea about this man, but I certainly know a lot more about him now. David Fales was part of the first colorectal unit in Australia at Sydney Hospital. And Sydney Hospital apparently was pulled apart by the state government in 1983, and that unit was closed, and he started at Westmead. But he did a lot of for people with ulcerative colitis and familial adenomatous polyposis. He would take out their whole colon and rectum and create initially a ileal reservoir and then connect it to their bottom. And when I was there, every Wednesday, he would do a total proctocolectomy and ileal pouch for someone with ulcerative colitis or FAP. And I would talk to these people like I've still got my notes from when I was a medical student. I scanned everything. And this person was telling me how they had come from rural New South Wales to see this man, and they had a devastating disease, ulcerative colitis, and that they could have their disease cured and they wouldn't have to have a bag. And the faith they had in this person. Now, David Fales was actually a very humble man. He was a World War II veteran. He did an arts, and then he was at Sydney Uni, and he was in the Navy, and then he came out, so he's a little older. But I didn't know he'd been part of this amazing unit. I just knew this guy was a really good surgeon. He was incredibly obsessive, though I'd never picked that up because maybe it was no different to me. And he was a really good teacher. And not only did he do this operation, and I just remember staying there the whole day. It was like 14 hours, and it was just amazing. I couldn't get enough. The next morning, he took us on a ward round. Not only saw the patients, he taught us how to examine patients. I don't know any surgeons who go through a respiratory examination with people and spend their time, their money. Uh, this guy was interested in teaching. And something happened in my head. It was like, I want to be like him. So there's the role model that you observe. He, I didn't know everything about him, but I saw this person and I thought, I'd like to be like him. Since he does total proctocolectomies, that's why I ended up in Cleveland, because it does the most in the world. And I never took my eye off the ball. So when I went to Concord as a medical student, first day, I said, I want to be a colorectal surgeon. People look at me like, what? I said, I want to be a colorectal surgeon. So I did it twice as an intern, the term. And I remember people just thinking, who is this guy? But I did. I never took my eye off the ball. I never stopped wanting to do it. I never stopped putting effort into doing it. And I did become a colorectal surgeon, and I ended up working at Concord and Prince Alfred, and it was fantastic. Um, but the thing is that, lots of funny things happen in the world. My elder sister died in 1991 of metastatic rectal cancer, Elaine, and it was horrible. She had three kids who were 5, 3, and 1. It was devastating for my family. I don't think my family's ever recovered from that.
No.
And then my parents should have been colonoscoped, but my mum said that she wouldn't have a colonoscopy till they brought Elaine back. Such thinking like that is very difficult. But my mum had a colon cancer when she was 62.
Ooh,
So I had no family history. My sister had a bowel cancer at 31 and then died. She had an operation, liver mets 6 months later, died 5 months later. And then I found out my great grandfather died in 1935 of bowel cancer. So my mother's father. So suddenly I went from having no family history to a terrible family history. So
wow.
it was also a good story. My mother used to say, poor boy couldn't save his sister, so he wants to save the world. I actually wanted to be a colorectal surgeon before my sister got sick. I actually thought God was laughing at me because my sister got the very thing I wanted to do colorectal surgery. But there is something about it that makes it passionate. And I do repeat that story many times. And a lot of people find great, I don't know what quite the word, a lot of patients, when they're suffering, the fact that I explained the suffering that my family went through, they find comfort in it. Like, it's like, oh, you're just telling me you don't know what this is like. And then they go, oh, you do know what this is like. And,
Wow.
you know, I, I'm, I really want to make a difference, but I don't necessarily, a lot of times I think I'm worthless, but I certainly have this strange thing of I'm obsessed about wanting to serve. I've been told my whole life, what is your purpose in life? It's to serve the community. I want to make a difference. I've never stopped wanting to make a difference. I still feel that I'm supposed to do something that I haven't quite done. And I feel that having these higher degrees will help me be prepared to do that. Whatever it is, I I actually don't ever want to stop working, but I know I will one day. I literally love teaching, and I want to be able to be in a position that I can keep making a difference.
Well, I think you've made a difference to thousands of people, even from what you've said in the last 10 minutes. There's something very powerful, Chris, about speaking the truth about sickness, about death and dying. You and I know, I mean, I'm putting my death doula hat on. So often we marginalize and ridicule and push away the death and the dying protocol. To speak of it requires courage and requires honesty, and it therefore builds, and you've seen it, these authentic relationships and a servant and a service relationship. And your whole life embodies that service protocol. But we've got another bit of the plait that we've got to add yet, and that is during this remarkable career, this transformative career. And by the way, I need to log for everyone watching this. Isn't it amazing how 6 weeks can change your life? So 6 weeks changed your life working with that remarkable man. But you started to do something else during this incredible surgery career, and that was you started to research and produce published articles. Now, you're an incredibly busy man. You've got a family, you've got an incredible protocol and procedure that you have to go through. We were lucky to fit in our gig today with you because you're such a busy human. But why did you decide to start writing refereed articles? Where did that come from?
So, to explain, there are three reasons why people in surgery do research. One is the flag waving exercise. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And
Mm.
there is that element. Two, for job promotion. You can't get on a training scheme a lot of times without papers, without high degrees. You can't get a job without it. Often you fail to differentiate between you and everyone else unless you have something in your CV that sets you apart. So it is competitive. People in medicine have been competitive their whole life. So there's competition. And then there's third is because you're actually interested. And so what I've been told and what I believe is that all three of those reasons, in some combination, are the reason people do research. If you are honest, but meaning, look at me, I'm doing this for my career, and actually I'm really interested in it. And when I do something that I'm interested in, that is when I put the most energy and the most effort. I have never put as much energy into something because I had to. So in surgery, we actually teach you train for a career, you do not train for a job. You do something because you're really keen and focused on it. And it's the same thing in research. You do something because it's the career in research you want to do. It is not the same that you're doing something for a job. And so I did a number of different research projects. This goes back to 1989. So I was an intern in 87. I sat my primary in 88, and I started doing research in projects in 89. And I, you know, I don't think I was very good at it, but I could see you have to come up with a protocol, you have to do a project, you have to then do collect the data, and then you have to write an abstract, present it, publish it. I've already explained to you before, I struggled a lot with things, and it took me a long time to get publications, but I was consistently doing projects. And in fact, I did a randomized controlled trial. That was actually one of the first projects I did back in 1989. And so that I started reading a lot more statistic books. I really like maths, so it seems that it's I'm quite good at it, I think. Yeah, that's not being humble. Um,
Being
but
accurate.
the bottom line is I found it fascinating. I wanted to answer questions, and as time has gone by, and I've become fascinated about how people think, but I want to understand how people think, why they think it. So that I've been doing since I was 18 years old. What are they thinking and why are they thinking it? That it's like a metacognition, but I have never stopped asking since I was 18. What is going on in their head, but not just what, why? And I keep doing that now. So I've watched so many people do research, and we do bring evidence-based medicine as best as we can. But in surgery, there's so many things that are a craft or a skill or an opinion. And if you can bring in evidence, and yes, there's 5 levels of evidence, and that's a whole evolution in itself. It You can actually change things. So many things have changed since I was an intern. Things that were dogma, and now they've gone out the window. I mean, nasogastric tubes, they used to be compulsory, but an elective procedure, you don't need to put one in post-operatively. And, I put a nasogastric tube down myself when I was a resident, just to see it was like. It was horrible. But at least when I'm putting one in a patient, I said, well, I put one of those down myself. And they go, really? And I said, yeah, well, I don't have to experience everything you've experienced, but some things, it's not very nice, but it is necessary sometimes, but not in every case. So many things continue to be needed to be researched in surgery because we don't know the best answer for so many things. Technology keeps changing, and there are different understandings that keep. And I love the data, information, knowledge, wisdom cycle. And I also like the accumulation. And I really have enjoyed researching the significant original contribution to knowledge. And then, so so I've looked up the definition of every single word and then epistemology. And then I find that the word epistemology, well, it's actually got two definitions because its first definition in English was translation from the German anyway. And then you start finding, I actually like the fact that there's two definitions because it does show the range from qualitative to quantitative. And today, I even had to write an appeal today about one of my students who had one examiner say their thesis was really good and the other one not so good.
There it
And I
is.
said, this is unfair. This is qualitative research. They're criticizing something that can only be sorted out by surveys and qualitative. It was like someone who's actually a very good scholar, but do I have to teach them something? It's like, did they miss something in their education? And it's almost like I have obsessed about the yin and the yang. I'm trying to be fair, and I really am obsessed about fairness. I cannot stand people being treated unfairly, and I will speak up, and that is how I've gotten myself in trouble at a few places because I've spoken too loud and upset a few people.
I don't think.
You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Look, I wouldn't know anything about that, Chris. I'm a good Irish Catholic girl, like you're a good Irish Catholic boy, I think. But yeah, Chris, look, for me, your courage. I talk a lot about courage and gumption. When people ask me about you, and a lot of people do, and we're incredibly excited because you will be the first PPP produced at CDU, and that's a wonderful, extraordinary thing and well deserved. But I use the word gumption a lot and courage a lot with you. You are people use the cliche of a lifelong learner. Well there you sit. And lifelong learners, when you learn and you respect learning in that way, it improves every part of your life, and you've shown that. And so therefore we need to go into the next iteration of this story, and I'll be fascinated with this. And I don't really know. I've only got the emails you sent me, so I've got proxies, and they may be inelegant ones. But what did draw you to say at this point of your life, an Australian in the United States, doing all sorts of remarkable jobs? Why a PPP now? Why a PhD by prior publication at this point?
I it's very important to reflect on what you're thinking now and to know that what you think you thought 30 years ago might be wrong.
Oh,
And
wow.
that there's a lot of psychological studies indicating that my thoughts now are not necessarily my thoughts from 30 years ago, even though I'm absolutely sure that I remember it clearly. But if you want to know where I'm at now, I'm going, I should have done a PhD when before or after my general surgical training. I should have done this and I should have done that, and all the shoulda, woulda, couldas in the world aren't going to make any difference.
Nope,
And but because I have this different attitude and I do love learning,
you do.
my dad taught me to read the Sydney Morning Herald when I was 3. Apparently, I was reading the street signs in the back of the car, and my mum and dad recognized that I was reading the signs. And he sat me down on his lap. And then, even though I remember being scared, silly of my father, there must have been times when he was being nice. And he showed me, and then I could start reading all the books that were in the house. And we had hundreds and hundreds of books. My mum could read like crazy, and she had a memory like an elephant, and so did her mother. And I remember her reading a book once, and 4 hours later, she was on another book. And I said, didn't you like that book? And she said, no, I finished it. And then I got that book and quizzed her, and she'd read it. And so that sort of thing, um, like I am just like my mother, for good or for worse. And I talk too much,
No, you don't.
but I am exactly the same as my mother in sort of how I think. But I've applied it to science. She loved the movies and had an encyclopedic knowledge of movies. I've applied all of my efforts to really scientific pursuits. And so it's this it's this thing of I can't stand not knowing. Even if I wasn't doing a PhD, every time there's a word, I have to look it up.
It is.
Every time there's something, I will research it. I have, I have lists and lists and lists. Thank God I found Evernote. But if we talk, I'll go home and I will make a whole list and research topics. So I'm doing it anyway. But there is an element here of improving my CV to where I felt worthy of wanting to be able to apply for something more. often I'm not feeling like I'm building a mountain. I often feel like I'm in a hole and I'm trying to get out of the hole. Now that is some Western suburbs psychological problem that I chip on my shoulder that I have. But literally, I don't think I'm better than anybody. I just don't want to feel lesser than other people,
Yeah,
if that can make any sense at all.
it does, mate.
So I
It
have
does.
this endless thirst for knowledge. I cannot stand not knowing things. And if I don't know, I have to go and read it up. I have to go and look it up. I mean, I found this guy Fisher, and then suddenly I found that his daughter, who wrote this book in 1978, I found she actually died only in February. She's 98. And suddenly I got this book off eBay because I had to learn more about it. And that I just now try to find books on the internet as ebooks because we have so many books in our house, so we change countries. It's just ridiculous. So now I look for books as PDFs and things, but literally it's this constant obsession to learn and to improve myself. That is the crux of it. And the formalizing it is in the worldly recognition of learning. So I always wanted to have clinical research, admin, and teaching. The MBA was the admin, the Doctor of Education was that, and then the PhD. There was I was supposed to mark a PhD last year, and then they said that you couldn't mark it if you didn't have a PhD. And now I don't know if you've had come across that,
Yeah, you've
but
got it.
it's
You've got to hold it to examine it. Yeah, yeah.
and then I was going, I'm not putting up with that.
No, they should you.
And so if I want to be an academic surgeon, I don't want anything in the way of me able to do what I want to do. And so, clinical research, admin, and teaching, I have to have excellence in all of those, and I have to demonstrate that I'm capable. It's like I've got to have a license in them all, if that makes sense.
Look, it does. And again, you and I, we come from very different disciplines, but we've got a lot in common. And I remember, and you and I have had a bit of a email correspondence about this. I got a bit sick to death of leadership in universities, not only Australian universities, but universities around the world. And you can complain about it, or you can actually research it. And I did, I think, my fourth master's degree in leadership. So you just stop complaining about it, you gain expertise on it, and you are part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And you are absolutely part of the solution there. Superb. But I need to, and I'll ask for honesty because I know you've had incredibly amazing experiences in the PPP, and then we've had a few moments where it's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. But what were the surprises of doing a PhD by prior publication? It is the dragon of the PhDs. It's rare, it's bespoke, it's different. And so, what were the surprises for you in this enrollment, Chris?
So, I got a few other theses to look at. There was one from a very nice head and neck surgeon and a very nice OBGYN, obstetrician and gynecologist. And I looked at them, and first off, I felt sick because I thought, I can't do something like that. But then I thought, to do that, I've got to do this really well. I need to plan ahead. So I didn't learn that I needed to plan because I already knew that. But, just so you know, I just, my planning sheets, this is from December, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notes. Um, and I knew it was a long journey, and I have literally read 200 books and 600 papers since December at least. And so that's been enjoyable. But what I didn't know is that I was looking to join it together, but what I didn't quite appreciate is that I stumbled across Sir Professor Ronald Fisher, who is one of the founders of modern research, of modern statistics, and he died in Adelaide in 1962, and that bits of his journey would parallel my entire thesis. in that the doing the methodology, doing good, you know, I'm I'm but a shadow in that man's greatness, but something about his story inspired me. He died in Adelaide. I did a study in 1995 in Adelaide on delayed diagnosis of colorectal cancer. I didn't know that 33 years previously, he'd been the same catchment area. He had presented late. He had symptoms. He was busy. He was in India in the February unwell, but he didn't do anything about it. He finally turned up to a doctor. He didn't even turn up for his barium enema, and they got phone calls. And then he had an operation, and then unfortunately he died exactly 9 months before I was born. But I don't believe in incarnation or anything like that. And I think I'm a lot taller than what he was, and I'm not short-sighted. But but the parallels are weird because he had a delayed diagnosis in colorectal cancer. All of my things are essentially colorectal cancer stents or and RCTs and doing things properly. And he really pushed randomizing. So it's not exactly the same, but so many of the things, the tests that I've done, he invented most of the tests I did in any of these projects and good methodology.
There it is.
And so suddenly I came across that, and then I wanted to find out more of his last. Now, all the people, they didn't want to know about his illness; they knew he died. I wanted to know about how he presented. So I found papers. I knew that Ludbrook, who had died, is a surgeon who wrote about it. I found that his son is an anaesthetist. I emailed him in Adelaide. He responded immediately and helped me. And then I found there was this man called Oliver Mayer, who's a famous Australian, a geneticist. He saw Fisher the day he died, and he had been like a year 11, 12 student and had been at university. And so, but Fisher had lived in his house. I emailed him. He responded immediately and helped me. And then he told me to contact Bodmer and Edwards, who were Fisher's two last students at Cambridge, and they responded the day I emailed them. So I started finding this incredibly interesting story
Oh,
that had lots of parallels and really inspired me to try to write this even better. How did my research relate to doing good research, good methodology, statistical tests, but just not the tests, the whole thing? So it was almost like it became a larger. So I even found I've emailed Adelaide University only yesterday because I found this correspondence between Fisher and Frank Yates and Fisher and William Cochrane. And they're going to scan more of the letters that I don't have to try to understand what happened when Fisher started saying that smoking wasn't the cause of lung cancer, which it is, but he was obsessed about the stats and what happened with these relationships. And why? Because it's exactly how surgeons talk to each other. I mean, it's not just the statistics and the protocols, it's the humanity. I find you can read stories about Newton and Leibniz and Newton and Sir John Hawkes, and you go, oh my God, they were human. They had the same problems, agreeing on things, and that helps me understand them. I've read some papers and I'm going, oh my God, they're human. That's why we've had problems now because we had the same problems coming. People's egos can be big. Two very smart people can look at exactly the same thing and come to a different conclusion. That is something I have seen in colorectal surgery my entire career. How two groups of people that I can admire, that you look at radiation. One says it's great, the other one says it's terrible. They look at the same papers and they come to different interpretations. And I'm going, oh my God, how do you do that? They do it because they're human.
yeah.
And I'm wanting to understand, how does humans with rational and irrational thoughts assess something and come with a human response? Because that's what we're doing. Evidence-based medicine is a rational construct, but what we practice is behavioral medicine. Just like there's behavioral economics, Tversky and Kahneman, I don't know, Daniel Kahneman won the 2003 Nobel Prize in Economics, I think it was, because Amos Tversky had already died in 1997, and you can't get a Nobel Prize if you're dead.
Yeah.
But all of their things, their funny combination of rational, and you know what? Patients want to be looked after by a human, not a robot. You might use a robot, but patients want someone who understands their suffering, who cares. They want you to be intelligent, they want you to be capable, but they want to know that you are human. And I say that every day. The person today we're talking, and he says, "Well, I hope you know your stuff," but they also say, "I need to know you care. I need to know you're invested in me," and is that funny essence, that combination is something that I find inspiring every day. I actually love operating and I love talking to patients, and don't tell anyone, but I do it for nothing because it is so enjoyable. It is a gift. And
And
so, yes, it is true that I was told since I can ever remember that my purpose in life was to serve. And I do like taking things apart and putting them back together. And I do like science. And somehow or other, surgery lets me do all of that.
And for colleagues that are watching this video, what I would say to you is I've had the great privilege of, I think I'm now at my 209th PhD completion. Beautiful Amanda is submitting this week. And of those 209, I've had two surgeons that I've had the great privilege of supervising. And can I say those two, and hello forever, those two surgeons are the most creative, passionate, inquisitive scholars I've ever supervised. So one would think, particularly in a PPP, the research is already done, there we go. But both of these remarkable people, and you're meeting one of them here, both of these remarkable people have generated this passionate, engaged, rigorous contextual statement, the bit that starts the PhD by prior publication. So you think it's going to be quite a pedestrian journey through research that's already been conducted. And then this incredible surprise and energy emerges through these two remarkable scholars. And that leads me to our last question, Chris. For colleagues around the world who are seeing you and inspired, I'm barely holding it together here. You've inspired me more than I can convey in language. But for colleagues watching this around the world, what would you say to them if they're thinking at this point of their career, maybe the PPP is a goer? What would you say to them to enable their decision making and how they perhaps move forward with that decision or decide against it? What would you say, Chris?
Um, I have a response in very plain Australianism, so please forgive me. Yeah, and I do like AC/DC. Pull your finger out and work hard. You made your bed, now lie in it. Now, that's my dad, but they wouldn't accept. There's a lot of things that people do and don't say now, but I won't accept it. They wouldn't accept it. If you want to do something, pull your finger out and work hard because you will get more out of it. I didn't understand when I was a kid. I thought that I was doing everything for my parents, even if they were getting something out of it. The person who was benefiting was always me. They literally, they whatever it is, they recognized something in me, and I believe they wanted me to get the hell out of there, and that I needed to do well at school, and that would change my life. And I feel that strongly since I can ever remember. And I still feel like I'm running, and I'll never stop that feeling. If you want a high degree, it will give you something inside, it will give you something on your CV, and it will give you probably a pleasing concept overall. Like I already imagine what's going to happen. It's an achievement. It's an achievement. And I don't even feel like it's my achievement because I can promise you, watching those videos in December, it was, if she would supervise me, I can do it. And talking to my family and saying, I met this, I told them I met you, but it wasn't, I saw you. But I felt like, and I just said, I feel so inspired watching it. But what was happening, it lit some fire in me. That, and it doesn't even matter, it's symbiosis. I imagined that it would light a fire. And that's what it's important. You can't buy enthusiasm, but you can instill it in others. All right. So I know by trying to be a good role model, you can potentially instill enthusiasm. The only person you can change is you, but you can be something that someone says, I want to be that. I want to do that. So, in terms of people around the world wanting to do a PhD, it's very common now that people want to do PhDs at older because we're all living longer, and they do it for many reasons: fulfillment, for career. There is the look at me, there is the career still, and there is the because they're interested in it. I'm probably doing all it for all three, and I'm not the only one. And the PPP is a avenue. I understand you explained it in your videos that it started in England from people who they changed the university, and these people didn't have PhDs, but they suddenly were teaching at universities and they wanted to have degrees and they had 150 papers. I think that's a fantastic thing because surgery is so time consuming. So many surgeons are incredibly well credentialed, but they don't have a PhD because they were spending 16 hours a day for 25 years operating and looking after patients. And so for surgery, I think it's fantastic. Apparently, a lot of medical and law want to do PPPs, but it will be because they spent so long doing their clinical or actual work. And that's understanding. And in fact, it may be lesser from the other faculties who didn't have 16-hour days.
I think that's brilliant. And I think also the professions, because it is, as you've said, I'll use the old-fashioned language, Chris, the elite profession. So it is medicine, it is law. We also have a large group of engineers that are coming towards us now, which is absolutely tremendous, and then moving into allied health. But this is powerful, this is important. And I've met some of the greatest humans on this planet working with and through the PPP. And it's not a sort of a capstone moment in a career. It's the kickstarter to the next level and the next stage of a career. So I just want to say to you, how do I even thank you enough for the gift and the joy that you've given me. We've got a little bit more to do on the thesis, but my goodness me, it's getting to shape now. And I thank you so much. It's so funny when you said I've only known you for 6 months. It feels like a couple of years, to be honest, that I've just known you and been inspired by you. And I
Well,
thank you
thank you,
for
but
our
you
connection.
don't thank me. You tell me to pull my finger out and work harder because that's the only praise I understand.
Look, I know it is, but look, I am staunch with you. The gift of working with Chris is I can say this is going incredibly well. Address these 4 things in this way, and then off he goes and comes back, and that work is done. So, Chris, I thank you, mate, and
Thank you.
I don't have to say pull the finger out because you are self-actualized. But what I can say is I respect you. I respect your research. I respect the sacrifices your family are making to work through this PPP, and you are changing the world one person at a time. Every respect, mate.
Thank you, Tara.